At 52 years of age, I have spent the majority of my life adhering to the established norms. Married at a young age, I nurtured 2 daughters and remained steadfastly loyal to my husband through every twist and turn of life. I held a conviction about the impropriety of routine, cherishing the life I crafted in silence, even as it diminished and lost its allure over the years. To me, love was unwavering, neither exciting nor original, merely acquainted. Yet, an event transpired not long ago, an occurrence that remains beyond my complete understanding. It unfolded unexpectedly. It was never intended to hold any significance. And yet, it prompted me to reevaluate every notion I held about my identity and the person I believed I would forever remain. Never did I imagine that something of this nature could befall me. I urge you, avoid the error I once made. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the sort of gray, unremarkable day when time seems to stretch just a bit longer. Once more, my car had succumbed to its mechanical woes, marking the 3rd instance this month, while Lucas, my husband, found himself ensnared in meetings throughout the afternoon. When his colleague Daniel proposed to drive me home from the grocery store, I readily accepted, my mind not pausing for a moment. I had crossed paths with Daniel at the handful of company functions I had attended throughout the years. He was in his late 30s, younger than Lucas, and spoke with a calm, assured demeanor. He consistently appeared courteous and considerate, the sort of gentleman who would hold the door open and meet your gaze when inquiring about your well-being. Though I had never pondered it deeply, I couldn't help but observe how his gaze lingered, not in a way that crossed boundaries, but simply longer than what was customary. Casual conversation flowed between us in the parking lot. He graciously volunteered to stow my bags in the trunk of his gleaming silver sedan, which was surprisingly tidy for a man living alone. "Are you certain this isn't an inconvenience for you?" I inquired, easing myself into the passenger seat. He smiled. "Not at all. I reside a mere 10 minutes beyond your location. Provides me with a perfect reason to leave the office ahead of schedule." His voice carried a gentle quality, enveloping and leisurely. It instilled in me a peculiar sense of safety, a sensation I rarely experienced around other men. With Lucas, every interaction had turned into a mere transaction. Tasks like grocery lists, bills, and picking up the dry cleaning. I held no resentment towards him for it. Isn't that the essence of marriage after 3 decades? As we exited the lot, the sun pierced through the clouds for a fleeting instant. The dashboard glowed with a gentle warmth, and I caught Daniel's sideways glance, his hand resting effortlessly on the wheel. "You appear to be quite reserved," he remarked. I merely shrugged. "Today has unfolded in a rather peculiar manner. You're familiar with the experience." He refrained from pressing further, merely nodding, his gaze returning to the road ahead. Yet there was an undeniable quality to his presence that enveloped the car, making it impossible to overlook. Devoid of romance, merely here, absorbing the moment. Our conversation meandered through the familiar topics: the bustling traffic, the unpredictable weather, and the charming new bakery that had recently opened on Elm. To my surprise, laughter bubbled up more than I anticipated, particularly when he recounted the tale of Lucas's valiant attempt to repair the office coffee machine, which ultimately resulted in a deluge in the break room. "He conveniently left that detail out," I remarked, dabbing the tears of laughter that had gathered at the corners of my eye. "He likely omitted the detail where he placed the blame on the intern," Daniel remarked with a grin. I chuckled once more, allowing the silence to settle in. The hum of the city gradually diminished as we ventured into the more tranquil suburban expanse of Maple Lane. The homes appeared bathed in the warm embrace of golden afternoon light, evoking a sense of familiarity and safety. At that moment, we found ourselves halted at a stoplight. We lingered in quietude for a brief spell. There was an unusual quality to that stillness, as if the moment itself had paused to inhale. Daniel glanced my way, not with any flair or theatricality, but just enough to connect with my gaze. "Could I pose a question to you, Elena?" I nodded, a sense of uncertainty washing over me as my pulse seemed to echo in my ears. "Have you ever pondered whether you remain visible to others?" The question struck a chord deep within me, awakening memories from a distant past I had long since left behind. "Seen," I murmured gently. He offered another nod. "What I truly mean is, beyond the roles of being a wife or a mother, it's about you as an individual." I averted my gaze to the window, watching the houses glide past, striving to maintain a steady tone in my voice. At every moment, I declared. The light shifted to green, yet we remained still for a moment longer. He paused for a moment, as though allowing me the opportunity to elaborate. I did not. I was unable to. With a soft touch, he eased his foot onto the gas pedal, and the car began to glide ahead. Silence enveloped us for several moments. A shift had occurred in the atmosphere, more substantial, more serene, yet my mind was in a frenzy. The journey pressed on in quietude for a time, yet it was not a silence that yearned for interruption. It seemed as though something was gradually revealing itself between us with a sense of carefulness and deliberation. I sat with my hands folded over my purse, gazing out the window, feigning admiration for the orderly rows of houses and the blooming lilacs gracing the front yards. Yet within, I found myself in a realm altogether different. Daniel's question at the stoplight echoed in my thoughts, a dropped stone sending ripples across the still surface of my mind. Have you ever pondered whether you remain visible to others? He had not intended it to come across as flirtatious. Perhaps he had indeed. Doubt had begun to creep in, leaving me uncertain. Yet regardless of the circumstances, it marked the first occasion in years that someone gazed upon me and didn't merely perceive me as Lucas's wife or the woman who consistently contributes potato salad to the cookout. As we made the turn onto my street, I cast a sidelong glance at Daniel. His demeanor exuded tranquility and concentration. Neither a smirk nor a knowing glance graced their features. He had no intention of steering me in any direction. He had merely observed my presence. "Thank you for the ride," I murmured as he eased the car into my driveway. He left the car idling, neglecting to shift it into park. "Elena," he said, his voice low yet resolute, "I didn't intend to make you feel uncomfortable. I trust I did not." "I did not," I responded swiftly. "It's simply that no one has posed a question like that to me in quite some time." He turned his gaze toward me then, truly observing, and an urge surged within me to find purpose for my hands, to engage my eyes. "Anything to ground myself. I've observed the manner in which you present yourself," he remarked. "Within you, there exists a vibrant essence that remains undeniably alive. Yet I perceive that you've been advised to conceal it." A warmth crept into my cheeks, not quite embarrassment, but rather a vivid awareness of being addressed in a language that had long faded from my ears. Words eluded me in that moment. As I extended my hand towards the door handle, anticipation coursed through me. Just as I was about to open it, he interjected, asking if it would be all right for him to accompany me to the porch. There was a moment of uncertainty. The logical side of me, the one that handled finances, crafted birthday treats, and nudged Lucas to remember his blood pressure medication, shouted a resounding no. Yet a different part of me, subdued yet more persistent, whispered in agreement. I nodded, confident in my agreement. We strolled along the brief path leading to the entrance. The porch light flickered, a small annoyance that nudged my thoughts toward Lucas. Yet, deep down, I recognized the likelihood that I would end up tackling the task myself. I rummaged through my bag for the keys, the tension taut like a thread woven between us. Neither constricting nor unpleasant, merely delicate. I apologize if I overstepped, he said, lingering a step behind me. A text I said again, turning to face him. You didn't. It's truly challenging to navigate a moment such as that. He inclined his head, his hands tucked away in his pockets. At times, it seems that certain moments unfold solely to remind us of our humanity, our enduring capacity to feel deeply. Once more, it appeared, an unwavering sincerity, the sort that required no reply, yet stirred an undeniable urge to respond. Thank you, I murmured, my voice trembling slightly. He gazed at me for a fleeting moment more, then offered a soft smile. Wishing you a pleasant evening, Elena. Likewise, Daniel. He pivoted and made his way back to his car, while I lingered for a moment, key in hand, the front door securely locked behind me as my world subtly transformed. As I crossed the threshold, the house enveloped me in a shroud of dimness. The lingering aroma of lemon cleaner permeated the air, a remnant of the afternoon's thorough cleansing. I placed my purse on the counter and lingered in the kitchen, absorbing the quietude that enveloped me. It lacked any sense of drama. Nothing had transpired in the conventional manner. No boundaries breached, no stolen kisses, and yet an undeniable shift had occurred. A sensation that gripped my chest and lingered in the ache of my hands. Daniel had caught sight of me, and now I found myself unable to look away from my own reflection. The subsequent days unfolded with an oddity that was subtle, lurking in the hushed recesses of my daily life. As I folded the laundry, strolled by the mirror, and poured my morning coffee, his question lingered in my thoughts, reverberating like a haunting melody. Have you ever pondered whether you remain visible to the world around you? It lingered in my mind with a tender persistence. Lucas remained oblivious to any changes around him. He seldom engaged in that activity these days. We had entered that phase of our marriage where silence felt comfortable. It was simply the essence of our communication. He inquired whether I had settled the utility bill. I would inquire whether he recalled to remove the trash. We lay next to each other, our backs touching, our dialogues primarily revolving around plans rather than emotions. I held no resentment towards him. I truly did not. Yet, an increasing awareness began to stir within me, a realization that I was fading away, initially at a gradual pace, and then in a sudden rush. 2 days later, a message from Daniel arrived. Daniel, I trust this isn't overstepping any boundaries, but I'm about to head out for coffee shortly, and I'd be delighted if you wanted to come along. There's no need to feel rushed. The message held my gaze for what felt like an eternity. Perhaps I could have turned a blind eye to it, or maybe I should have. Yet I refrained, myself. Where might that be? Our paths crossed at a quaint little spot nestled at the intersection of 5th and Lawson. It lacked extravagance. A quaint coffee shop adorned with ivy that gracefully climbs its exterior, its windows perpetually fogged in the gentle embrace of morning light. Arriving early, I selected a booth tucked away in the back, a choice driven by a desire for safety and the wish to remain unnoticed. Upon his arrival, a look of surprise crossed his face at the sight of me already present. Yet, I found myself taken aback as well. He settled into the chair opposite me, offering a subtle smile. "I appreciate your presence." I nearly refrained. I admitted honestly, swirling my coffee despite having added nothing to it. Indeed, a silence lingered. Yet again, it was not uncomfortable, merely contemplative. "I have been reflecting on your words, and I have come to the realization about the importance of being seen." He inclined his body ever so slightly, attuning his ears to the sounds around him. It seems I was unaware of just how deeply I longed for it. Not merely attention, but rather the act of someone truly noticing, someone perceiving beyond the surface. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. In our relentless pursuit of caring for those around us, we often neglect the vital act of turning our attention inward, forgetting to pause and reflect on our own well-being. One can easily find themselves adrift. "It seems I lost my way some time back," I murmured softly. For a brief moment, silence enveloped us, and neither of us uttered a word. Then, maintaining his tone and posture, Effin remarked, "I don't want to complicate your life, Elena. That is not the reason I made contact. I simply find pleasure in our conversations, that's all." It was the genuine warmth in his voice that unraveled me, devoid of flirtation or implication, simply an expression of human kindness. It felt unique, cherished in a way that was almost holy. Our conversation meandered for almost an hour, touching on trivialities that somehow felt profoundly significant. The echoes of our childhoods, the meals that brought us joy, the melodies that lulled us into restless nights. I shared with him how, in the quiet moments when the kids were small, I would dance alone in the kitchen, seeking a spark of life within the stillness. He smiled as if it were the most exquisite thing he'd encountered all week. As we prepared to depart, a moment of hesitation gripped us once more. That now familiar pause lingered between us, enveloping us in a gentle shroud. He swung the door wide for me, and as I ascended into the brightness, he remarked, "Elena, if you ever find yourself in need of a conversation or simply a change in the rhythm of your breath, know that I am here." I nodded, maintaining his gaze for a moment longer than was perhaps wise. My sincere gratitude. We parted ways on that sidewalk. There are no gestures, no commitments, merely a shared comprehension. Yet, in that quiet night, as I rested beside Lucas, his back facing me, his breaths came slow and steady. A sensation began to awaken within me, neither guilt nor regret, only a profound awareness. A shift had occurred, and for the first time in many years, uncertainty loomed over what lay ahead. A week slipped by. I neither saw Daniel nor heard from him, and I refrained from reaching out as well. Not due to a lack of desire, but rather from a necessity to carve out space for introspection and to grasp the tumult within me. I navigated my days as a woman, holding an unseen question close to my heart. The focus was not on Daniel. Not quite. The focus was on me. Whom had I transformed into? Who was I permitted to remain? As the evening unfolded and Lucas retreated upstairs to catch the news, I lingered in the kitchen, methodically wiping the already pristine counter again and again. The visage that met my gaze in the window was one of age and gentleness, yet undeniably present. Yet another presence. I reflected on the person I once was, long before the marriage settled into routine, before the girls embarked on their college journeys, before the silence grew so deafening. She twirled across the cool tile floors, her bare feet whispering against the surface, conjuring chaos in the kitchen and losing herself in the verses of poetry as the night deepened. That woman had not disappeared. She lingered in anticipation. And in an unexpected moment, a solitary question from a man I scarcely knew had shattered the barrier I had constructed around her. That evening, I approached Lucas with a sense of urgency, expressing my need for a conversation. We gathered around the dining room table, reminiscent of our younger days when we were penniless yet filled with dreams. I gazed at him, truly gazed. The man with whom I had woven the fabric of my existence, the man who brought my children into this world, my companion, even at this moment. I expressed that I had been feeling unseen. He blinked, taken aback. Could you clarify what you mean? It seems to me that you no longer truly perceive my presence. I don't believe I've allowed you to. He reclined, arms crossed in contemplation. What is the source of this? With a moment's pause, I weighed my words with precision. From a deep, still corner of my being that has remained silent for far too long, I refrained from mentioning Daniel, not out of secrecy, but because this situation transcended the presence of another man. This was a reflection on the woman I had ceased to be, the woman I wished to etch in my memory. Lucas cast his gaze downward, his fingers instinctively tracing the line of his jaw, a familiar gesture that surfaced whenever words eluded him. I suppose I simply believed we were at ease. We are, I remarked. Yet I yearned for something beyond mere comfort. I yearned to experience the thrill of life once more. Silence enveloped us for what felt like an eternity, with neither of us daring to break it. Yet, for the first time in years, we found ourselves genuinely present, united in a moment that transcended the mundane concerns of chores, schedules, and bills. In the end, he inquired, "What is it that you require from me?" "I have yet to discover the answer," I murmured softly. "However, I must begin to uncover the truth." The following morning, I set out for a stroll, without adornment, without a purpose. Only the elements of air, sunlight, and the passage of time. As I journeyed along my route, I found myself passing the quaint coffee shop nestled at the corner of 5th and Lawson. My feet came to a halt of their own accord. I lingered for a moment, observing the ebb and flow of people as they passed by. Upon entering, I stepped inside. Daniel was absent. And oddly enough, I found a sense of acceptance in that realization. After placing my order for coffee, I settled into a chair by the window. I retrieved a notebook that had lain dormant for years. The pages lay untouched, yet an unmistakable sense of a new chapter lingered in the air, not of an act that is reckless or forbidden, but rather of something essential. I required no rescue. I had no need for romance or salvation. I simply had to remind myself that I still existed in this moment, that I remained a sight to behold. As I savored my coffee and let the ink flow onto the page, a new realization dawned upon me. I had begun to recognize myself once more, and that sufficed.